Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me for Conversations with Alan. I'm Alan Locker, the child of two Holocaust survivors. I created Conversations with Alan to foster honest discussions about the rise of anti-Semitism and hate, with the hopes of sparking conversations that encourage us to reflect on our role in shaping history. My goal is to inspire collective action to eradicate hate in all its forms. These conversations, I believe, are more crucial than ever as anti-Semitism continues to rise around the world. Tonight's discussion is especially meaningful to me. As many of you know, I would not be alive today if not for the Christians who risked 11 lives to save my mother and grandmother during the Holocaust, and I believe 8 lives to save my dad's family. That's why I felt it was important to speak with two men who, as Christians, are standing up for Jews and for Israel at a time when many are not. I'm honored to welcome filmmakers Todd Morehead and Justin Kron to discuss their powerful new documentary, October 7th, Bearing Witness to the Massacre. Both Todd and Justin have visited Israel more than 30 times and bring a deep commitment to documenting truth in the face of disinformation. Their film examines the atrocities of October 7th, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust, through survivor stories, first responders, a former hostage, and even the chilling footage captured by the terrorists themselves. Together, we'll explore Gaza's history, the ideology of Hamas, the filmmakers' personal motivations, and their mission to spark meaningful dialogue on university campuses, in faith communities, and across the globe. Please help me welcome Justin and Todd to Conversations with Alan. Hi, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here.
Alan, thank you for having us on.
Great to be with you.
The film really, as I said, powerful. As I said backstage, footage I had never seen, just so many different conversations going throughout the film, which we'll talk a little about. But I wanted to mention, this conversation takes on a deeper meaning today, if that's even possible, with the Minneapolis shooting. The gunman had written neo-Nazi messaging, including 6 million was not enough on parts of his guns. My heart goes out to everyone in Minneapolis today. Let's talk about your over 30 visits to Israel and how those trips have shaped your personal and spiritual motivations for making October 7th bearing witness to the massacre. Justin, Todd, whoever wants to take the lead.
Do the honors, Justin.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, Alan, again, thanks for having us on. And I just want to echo just our heartfelt sympathies to the victims of the shooting in Minneapolis. Again, just senseless violence, which appears to be motivated, by an extremist ideology, including anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And it's just, it's really, really hard to continue to see that.
I was, I wasn't expecting that. I had seen all day, news going by about the shooting. And then, Noah Tishby posted those images of the guns, and I was, just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention here, the shooter targeted Catholics, Christians at a Catholic school and church.
During the first week of school.
Right. Once again, kind of reminding us of this connection between the Jewish and Christian communities, which really does kind of get to what our motivation has been in bringing films like October 7 to the world, is that we see this war against Israel as not just a war against Israel, but really it's a war against the West, the Judeo-Christian West, and so we're very connected to that. We kind of see Israel as the tip of the spear when it comes to combating the radical Islamic ideology that not just affects them and their safety and their security, but the safety of Christians as well in the Middle East and here as we see in America. I think it's good to remind everyone that it's not just Jews who live in Israel. There's Christians who live there too. as well with, as within the Palestinian territories who are being impacted. And so we as members of the Christian community, we just feel that our hearts are interwoven with Israel and its history and its future. And so it's important to us, or at least it motivates us to want to help tell Israel's story in a way that we feel is fair and balanced in a world where there's so much distortion and misinformation, disinformation related to who Israel is.
How far back does your connection go? I know over 30 years. Do you remember the first time you were there? And have you always felt that connection, both of you?
Well, for me, so I come from a mixed family background, Catholic on my father's side, Jewish on my mother's side, but my mother became a follower of Jesus at a young age, and I grew up in that tradition as well. So there is some familial connection that I have, but I was first, I think, really connected to Israel when I went on a trip with my mom when I was in my mid-20s. We went on a typical Christian tour where you go and see the sights and see the Bible come to life, and it was magical. And that experience impacted me so much that I decided to start a program called Experience Israel for young Christian adults who wanted to walk in the footsteps of Jesus and study God's word on location and learn more about the history of Israel and really kind of better understand the Christian faith through a Jewish lens. I've kind of come to believe that, if you don't understand the first 2/3 of the Bible, then for Christians, you can't really fully appreciate and understand the last third, the New Testament. And so I just, started through taking trips, leading tours, and meeting people, Israelis. And now I'll be honest, when I went to Israel, I didn't really think much about the non-Jews who live there. When I think of Israel, I would think of the Jewish people, Jewish history, and didn't really consider much about the non-Jews in the land. But thankfully, over time, my eyes started to be open to the reality that Israel just isn't a country of Jews. 20% of Israel's population is Arab. And so as a Christian, a follower of Jesus, it was just a matter of, wanting to learn and to better understand, what is God's heart for the non-Jews in the land, as well as then, of course, the Palestinian Arabs, those within the territories. And so in time, as you go to Israel, it's inevitable that you're going to start learning and experiencing more of the conflict. In fact, for myself, I was taking tours through the Second Intifada. I was one of few tour leaders who were still bringing groups during that time. And so I became very connected to Israel's story. And in 2005, or was it 2006, the Second Lebanon War, when Israel was attacked by Hezbollah, I was with a group that was just 5 miles from the Lebanon border, and 2 Katyusha rockets landed 900 meters from where I was sitting. And I very much felt the impact of those rockets. And, for the next several days was essentially running from the attacks from Hezbollah. So you go through those type of experiences, and it inevitably brings you into wanting to better understand what is Israel's story, and wanting to then share that story with the world.
And Todd, for you?
Yeah, I became a follower of Jesus really young. I was about 4 years old, and I remember with that decision to follow Jesus, a love for the Jewish people and the land of Israel followed suit. And I don't know exactly when it happened, but it was pre-teens, and I thought every Christian was so excited about Israel. I just thought it was so natural. Then I met my wife, and I found out, no, this is kind of different. This is not everybody's response. And I began to, it's kind of like Justin, I began to lead Christians to Israel on what you would call a biblical pilgrimage tour, except we would weave in surfing as well. So my tours have always been a little more fun than Justin's, but
I'll give you that. Yeah. I'll give you that.
I like that part of the film too.
Yeah. So I did that for years, and I was just learning, continuing to learn. Actually, I did my first trip when I was 18 with my dad, and it was one of the typical tours like Justin was talking about, on and off a tour bus, but it changed my life. And it was like, as far as that passion that I already had, it was like throwing gas on the fire, and it really made it go. And so I came home and I started attending a Bible study, one that was from more of a Jewish perspective, which seems funny because the Bible is written by Jews, primarily to Jews, but not exclusively. So what perspective are you going to learn it from, right? But anyways, that's where I found myself, and learning more and more, getting more and more excited and passionate about Israel and the Jewish people, consuming a lot of my time and a lot of my thoughts. Fast forwarding in 2012, I made it my first film called Promised Land, Israel Through the Eyes of Surfers. And it was just that. I had met so many surfers in Israel that had this similar, they had all the stories of every Israeli that lives there, right? They had the Aliyah story, which is the immigration story.
Yeah.
They had the Holocaust story. Just like you, Alan, they had the story of parents or grandparents that either died or survived the Holocaust. They had this story of entering the IDF in a mandatory service. And they have a story, just like every other Israeli, of being surrounded by enemies that want to wipe you off the face of the earth. But we decided to tell this story of Israel through the lens of surfing and through friendship. And then as a result, Justin and I met through that film, and we began.
Yeah, a mutual friend of ours handed me a copy of DVD when those still existed of Promised Land, and we were at a conference together. And I watched it in my hotel room that night, and I was absolutely blown away, just blown away. Like this, it was a really well-made film, tells Israel's story. It's like surfing. It was such an interesting angle on the Israel story. And I'm like, who is this guy, Todd? And so I reached out that night. I sent him an email.
Is it streaming anywhere now that anybody watching can?
Yeah, actually, we've made it available for free on YouTube. If you go to the Hope in the Holy Land website, which is the film that Todd and I ended up making together after Promised Land, there is a link on our resource page of hopeintheholyland.com, and you can go straight to watch Promised Land, or you could just go to YouTube and
YouTube. If you put in Promised Land, Israel Through the Eyes of Surfers documentary, you will find it.
And is it Hope, HOPE, and in the Hope in the Holy Land.com?
Yeah, hopeintheholyland.com. So
it's probably easier just to go to YouTube and find the Hope in the Holy Land handle, and it's on our handle. Yeah.
Although we would love for you to see Hope in the Holy Land too. But
yeah, I'm gonna put it up for folks as well.
Okay.
The link. So
yeah, and if you put up Hope in the Holy Land, that'll give people the link to our last film. And
I definitely, I find the fascination with Israel fascinating. Like, I've only been there once. I loved it. I wish I knew more about my own religion, but I did work early in my career and have remained sort of friendly with Kathy Lee Gifford, who is a Christian, and I see her pilgrimages and her love of Israel and what she says. And so I am fascinated by that.
Was yours a birthright tour, Alan?
No, I'm too old. I wish.
No, but when you went,
no, I went. My husband had a girlfriend who he knew from New York, who was Israeli, who moved home, had gotten married. So we went. And on that trip, I went to Yad Vashem. And that's when I brought my mother's story and began the process of honoring the family that saved her, that Christian family. So I went in person to Yad Vashem with the story and all of the information. And to be honest, it was the first time my husband actually saw my mother come to life, because he got to watch her interview in Yad Vashem with the woman who was, putting the righteous for the family in Holland for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's a video of your mom at Yad Vashem?
In the Shoah Foundation from Steven Spielberg, we got my parents to do that before they passed away. So
yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. So talk about, October 7th happens. You guys are filmmakers at this time. What, your love of Israel, your love of the Jewish people, of that place, what led you to make October 7th bearing witness to the massacre?
Yeah, so I'll say before we made October 7, we had released a film called Hope in the Holy Land that has been mentioned. The subtitle is Delving Beneath the Surface of the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict, which came out in May of 21.
That's what that film is about, the conflict.
That one is about an overview, in some ways, kind of maybe even a deep dive on understanding the conflict. We had observed, so when Todd's first film came out, Promised Land, there were a couple of other films that were targeted to the Christian community, especially to the evangelical Christian community, that was painting the story of Israel in the conflict as one of Israel being a foreign, colonizing, occupying oppressor. And that was the reason for the suffering of the Palestinian people. And if you were a Christian Zionist who supported Israel, then you were then culpable in the suffering and oppression of the Palestinians. That was the narrative that was being pushed to evangelicals, to the communities that we were a part of. And I introduced Todd to these films, and I'm like, Todd, man, like, you need to make another film. Like, you need to make a film that's more balanced about the conflict and in the history. And I think Todd at that time was pretty exhausted after having just made Promised Land. And, he was very upfront, said, Justin, making films, not easy, and they cost a lot of money. And I don't have all the money sitting around to go make another film. And long story short, we decided, let's partner together. Let's raise the funds, which took much longer than we expected, to make this film that if someone were to ask, like, what's one film I should watch to better understand the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we wanted our film to be that film.
Wow.
And thankfully, the feedback.
Now I'm mad I didn't watch it before this interview. I'm going to watch it after, because I think that is so important for everybody to understand the conflict before we speak and take a side or do anything in response. To understand, I think, is so important.
Yeah, right. It really is. Getting that historical context is extremely important.
And we sought out to make the most unbiased film possible, which is very hard to do. And it's very hard for two Christian Zionists to do, but to put our bias aside and let, we have a Reverend Johnny Moore actually says, finally, somebody has let the Palestinians speak for themselves. And that's what we did. We let people, not just Palestinians, but we let Israelis and Palestinians speak for themselves. The film, like October 7th, is told through my kind of my journey, and I'm interviewing and doing lots of man on the street interviews with both Israelis and Palestinians, so you can hear what people say, what they're thinking.
You get perspectives from both sides in Hope in the Holy Land, and we kind of let the viewer then come to their own conclusion about what's going on there. Of course, Todd, gives his perspective and his conclusions as well. But one of the great things about Todd is, although he's the face and the vessel, the narrator, the person who guides the film, he doesn't get in the way of those that he's interviewing. He really just asks the questions and lets people speak. And we've partnered with just a phenomenal director and editor, Jesse Schluntz, who just does a phenomenal job with storytelling and putting everything together, and then fairly representing. That's very important for us, is to fairly represent the people that we interview. And so we've been thrilled with the feedback on that film. It's Still the only 5-star rated film on Prime Video related to the conflict, which is not really easy to do. Hopefully there's no anti-Israel people who are listening right now who go and give it a 1-star rating. There's been a few.
There goes our 5-star rating. Thanks.
But hopefully those who are listening and go and watch it and like it and give a good rating. But it was important for us to tell the story and the history so that people can better understand the conflict when they hear of things in the news, of events, etc. Just that they would have a framework for what's going on.
So I want to hear how that led to October 7th, but I'm curious before we go there, because you're talking about that understanding. When do you think you both finally truly understood the conflict? Because I think it is very difficult for people to understand, the conflict. I mean, there's no other word. I mean, it is a conflict, and I find people don't fully understand or take the time to want to learn the history of the conflict.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't think, for one, I don't fully understand the conflict. I don't think I fully ever will. It's kind of layers. It's like an onion. But for me, during the filming of Hope in the Holy Land and leading up to it, I began to understand a lot more as I was learning about the ideologies behind radical Islam and throughout the Palestinian territories. It's the most prevalent ideology. You call it a force behind what they do and say and think. Learning about that was very eye-opening, and then experiencing it on the ground. I would say, around 2016, 2017, 2018, I began to understand it more. And then, fast forward to the events of October 7th, 2023. And it's as if the stuff that Jess and I had been talking about and trying to warn the world about through our films, it happened. There's nothing new that happened on October 7th, except that Hamas was able to do it because they got through, because Israel's security failed. And they've been trying to do this for so long. So there was nothing new. All the ideologies have been at work for so long.
Yeah. Listen, Alan, I don't think there's a moment. I think it's something that develops over time. And there's different moments along the way, and I can talk about several of them. But I'll just mention this one. We were filming in Ramallah, which is essentially the capital of the Palestinian territories. It's the heart of the Palestinian Authority, where Mahmoud Abbas's, I think he calls it a palace or something like that, is located. And it's a middle to upper class Palestinian city. It's not what most people would expect. You tend to think of the Palestinians as living in kind of depraved, or not depraved, but diminished environments.
Camps. Is that a refugee
camps? It's and poor and such. And that's not at all what Ramallah is like. I mean, there's a main street there with boutiques and cafes and
Levi's, Popeye's chicken.
Yeah, there was Popeye's chicken on one side and Kentucky Fried Chicken on the other side. So, you want a conflict, put those two across the street from each other. But and so we're walking down Main Street. And now, listen, I had heard that there was a time where Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler was a bestseller in the Arab world. But I had never seen, that being sold anywhere. But here we are, we're walking down Main Street in Ramallah, or it's not called Main Street, but you get the idea. And here's a used bookseller who's right there in the street with, I think there was what other book? I think Left Behind. There was a Left Behind. I don't know if you've heard that series about end times prophecy, but I think that book was being sold, or the Da Vinci Code. That's what it was. It was the Da Vinci Code that's being sold in Arabic. But right next to it, there's Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler being sold in broad
Arabic.
daylight in Arabic. And here you have dozens of people walking by who could easily see it. And it was like any other book. Now imagine that book's being sold in your town where you live. I would think most people, at least I know where I live here in Chicago, we'd walk by, be like, what the crap are you doing? Like, why would you be selling that? I mean, that's considered to be the most dangerous book ever written, that espouses, killing Jews. I mean, it's insane, but here it is. And I knew at that point, I'm in a completely different world. The worldview of the people that we're with and that we're interviewing is completely different than how I see the world. And so I think what we have is we have an ideological battle that's raging. And if you dig underneath the surface, it really becomes a battle of over whose God is the real God, whose religion is the true religion. And to know that this isn't just a war over territory, but it's a holy war. It's a religious war. And that is the driving force behind the conflict that we continue to see to this very day.
Scary stuff. So let's talk October 7th. What led to this film? What was your hope in setting out to make this? Todd.
Yeah, Todd, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So we were in the process of creating a docu-series called Hope in the Holy Land, the series. And we had done episode 1, which is also on our website. It was called Liberation or Occupation. And it was my time in Hebron.
Was that prior to October 7th happening?
Yes, it was. So that was already out. And we were looking to do more episodes. And then October 7th happened. And we were thinking as a team, we can't not cover this. We have to go. This is
if you're going to do a series about the conflict, we got to
be there. Yeah. So we scrambled. We scrambled our team together, our funds together, and produced as much as we could before we got there. And we ended up going in May 2023, so about 6 months after the events. And
24, May 24.
Sorry, 24, thank you. Yes. So that's what spurred it on. We were already in the process of making that docuseries.
Yeah, we had so much material that didn't make it into the feature documentary that we thought, well, let's use all this and make a 6-episode series. So we had a 6-episode series planned. And the first was Todd in Hebron. It was a great interview with Yeshai Fleischer, spokesperson for the Jewish community in Hebron, just telling the history and story of the Hebron massacre and the influence of the Grand Mufti Haj Amin al-Husseini in the 1920s, who used disinformation, saying that the Jews wanted to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem and in the Dome of the Rock to incite hatred against the Jews. And so there was this massacre in 1929, which if you look at the images of that massacre and the stories from that, it's actually very similar to what happened on October 7th. And you can make a straight line from 1929 right to October 7, 23. And so, listen, that episode came out 37 days before October 7. And it was kind of eye-opening for us, like, wow, what we just covered, what we just released, it's happening again. And so, as Todd mentioned,
in fact, Hamas called it the Al-Aqsa flood because it was spread with the disinformation that Israel was going to take over the Temple Mount.
Yeah, that's what they used to motivate their militants to go and fight against Israel. Is again, we're saving Al-Aqsa, we're saving our holy sites, and So it was shocking, for us, right after October 7th. In fact, it wasn't even after, really. It was on October 7th. I mean, while literally the bodies of Jews, of Israelis, and others who were killed were still warm, literally. And there's statements that are being put out. I don't know, Alan, if you've covered this in a previous episode, but 30 organizations signed a statement from Harvard University blaming Israel for the events of October 7th, putting it all on Israel. And it was like, and there was several other things said in the statement that really distorted the history of Gaza. And so for us as filmmakers, as documentarians, historians, really, we're like, well, we've got to make sure we do what we can to help people better understand the historical context to October 7. What's the real story? What's the real history? Who is Hamas? What motivates?
And I love that part of, that you go into that in the film heavily to give that.
Well, it's the elephant in the room that so many people are avoiding because they don't want to be called an Islamophobe or whatever. But we're not talking about all Muslims. We're talking about the more radicalized Muslims and what they believe in. It is absolutely imperative. In the same way, it's imperative to understand as Americans why, on 9/11, a radical Islamist flew airplanes into the World Trade Center. There's an ideology there. You can't ignore it. And we've ignored it for so long. And we decided, no, we got to talk about this because it doesn't make sense any other way.
Yeah. So Hamas had to be explained. And we also had to give the history of Gaza, especially the disengagement in 2005, because a lot of the statements that were being made is that Gaza was under this brutal occupation and that the Palestinians were just doing what any normal human would do and just resist oppression. And that's why October 7th happened. But completely misses and disregards the fact that Israel completely withdrew from Gaza. Military, about 9,000 Israeli civilians were pulled out. And Gaza was completely given over to the Palestinian Authority. And then what happened just less than 24 hours after Israel disengaged in August of 2005, Hamas starts firing rockets into Israel.
Yeah.
Less than 24 hours. Over the next few months, they continued to do so. There was, I think there was 1 or 2 Israelis who were killed by the end of that year. And then in the beginning of 2006, you have legislative elections in the Palestinian Authority. And who do the people vote into power? They vote Hamas into power. These are the very people that you knew were already firing rockets into Israel. These are the people who were responsible for several of the terrorist attacks that happened in the early 2000s during the Second Intifada. So the Palestinian people knew very, very well who they were voting into power. They knew very well what Hamas's charter was, which is, in a nutshell, to eradicate Israel and to replace it with an Islamic State. And so they knew exactly who Hamas was. And so that's the history that people seem to either ignore or just simply don't know. And so we wanted to make sure that in the October 7 film, which is pretty, I would say it's the one unique thing about our October 7 film versus some of the others that have come out. I mean, there's some really good ones like We Will Dance Again. And then there's one, Sheryl Sandberg did a film on hate or
October
Screams Before Silence, it's called, which
right.
focuses on the sexual violence that occurred on October 7. Great films. And there's a couple others as well. But what those films don't do that we decided to do is to cover the history, give the historical context before the events of October 7. And so if people want more of that overview, or I guess you could maybe even say a deeper dive, then our film will help provide that.
And you had difficulty getting the film released, I know you sent a letter around. You got in some doors and then the doors were closed. Do you ideas of why those doors closed? Anti-Semitism, fear.
I mean, we can speculate. I like what Todd says. What, Todd, you like to call them what? Cowards.
Oh yeah, they're being cowards.
Yeah.
They don't want to get involved in something that is touchy or
controversial.
At least on this topic. They might pick another topic, but
something that might cause people to sympathize with Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I spoke to somebody who's in the film industry. He's a producer. I mean, he's done some big things, and he just said, Justin, it's too pro-Israel. It doesn't fit the narrative. It's not the narrative that the industry wants to present, and it's risky too. That's the other part to this is, you put a film like October 7, and there were a couple of distributors who initially gave us very positive, kind of really like the film. This could be, in theaters kind of thing, who then just, pulled out on us and kind of gave us just the standard, doesn't kind of fit with what we're focusing on right now kind of response. But listen, if I was in their shoes, let's say I'm the owner of AMC Theaters or whoever. Do I want a film titled October 7 in my theater right now, given how many attacks have happened against Jews or non-Jews who seem to support Israel? Probably not. I would say no. I would not want to do that. I don't want to have to spend the security, spend the money on security. Or if something does happen, then I'm going to be losing money because nobody's going to want to go to my theater. So, listen, I can kind of get it from that perspective. But
I absolutely. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a cousin who's a survivor up there in age and doesn't like that I do this, that I or that I post on social media, still very fearful. Do you guys fear speaking up in support of Israel and Jews yourselves?
Let's just say I do have fear, but not the kind of fear that paralyzes me. I'm going to push through that because I believe it's the right thing to do. I mean, maybe you could call it courage, or maybe some people might think it's crazy. People, have been for years telling me I'm crazy to go travel in Israel, to lead tours to Israel. I'm going in October. Todd's going in October. We'll always have people like, is it safe, to go to Israel? Listen, you can't live your life.
Go back. I mean, it's, I loved it, and I, will go back at some point. I just haven't had the opportunity.
Yeah. So
I hear you with that because, it took me a very long time. I'm 58, and it was really around the age of 28 where I started to understand what my parents had been through. Schindler's List came out. My nephew was born, and from a New Jersey hospital, from a payphone, my mother called one of the 9 children she was hidden away with, one of those family members, to say that her grandson was born. That's the impact that family had on my mother. I cannot not speak up because we would not be having this conversation if that family didn't do what they did for me and my family.
Yeah. I feel like,
go ahead, Todd. Yeah.
I feel, Jeremiah the prophet said something along the lines of, there's like a fire in his bones, and if he doesn't speak out, it will consume him. I kind of feel like that, in a sense that it's what God has put on my heart for a reason for all these years. And it's time to act, and knowing how important the Jewish people are to God's heart. he calls them the apple of his eye, then they got to be important to me too. And so it's just kind of like go time, you know?
Yeah, you may recall, Alan, we ended the film with a quote
Yeah,
by
please.
Pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was executed by the Nazis shortly before the end of the war because of his participation in a assassination attempt on Hitler's life. But he said this, he said, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. So for Todd and me, as Christians, we want to walk in that same spirit. We believe that now is the time to speak and the time to act. In fact, it has been for a while, and we have been doing that. We didn't just decide to do that after October 7th. But we do definitely want to encourage people to do so, especially other non-Jews and Christians. Now's the time.
Now is the time. When we honored the family at the Israeli consulate in Holland, they are given a plaque with a quote from the Talmud that says, "He who saves a life saves the world." And I try to say that as much because
Yeah.
Which I think that quote right there really embodies the Jewish people. And so when people are spreading disinformation about Jews committing genocide, Israelis committing genocide, I just tell them, you're just showing your ignorance. You make it really clear that you don't know who the Jewish people are. It's not a part of their character. And that life is not just a Jewish life, it's any life. It's just not a part. Of course, there's people, in every society who are different than that, and maybe they're more, whatever, they're violent or something like that, but it's not the society as a whole at all. And if I tell people, Mike, I remember one of my Israeli buddies who's a surfer. I had no idea he was first in at Gaza. He was first in actually at Kfar Aza. And he was talking about, he's a paramedic, and he was talking about one of the Hamas fighters got shot. So he started working on this Hamas fighter to save his life until the fighters tried to stab him. And then there was the end of it. But that's the kind of, like, who does that? So, right. And what you said just sparked that in my mind. He who saves a life saves the world. Is that how?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And it's true to the Jewish people. It's true to their ethos. So I try to convey that to people, that my friends who are confused about it, there's a lot of confusion going on.
Yeah. And I think I was going to say, I think for a lot of people, this is the first time maybe they've ever really looked this closely at what war is like. Yeah. And just how brutal and tragic it is on the lives of innocent civilians who are drawn into the war. But, it's no different than what Germany, what the Nazis did to their own civilians, or the Japanese. Sadly, when you start wars, there is a high probability that your civilians are going to end up, there's going to be casualties. And I think people need to learn the difference between civilians who are intentionally butchered and killed, as Hamas did on October 7th, and those who are unintentionally killed in the crossfire of war, which is what we would say is, what has sadly happened as Israel has responded to Hamas's desire to continue to repeat October 7th if given the opportunity. And the fact that Hamas continues to hold 50 hostages, 20 or so who are still alive. And if Hamas truly cared about its civilian population, one, they wouldn't have done what they did on October 7th. And two, on October 8th or soon thereafter, they would have released all of the hostages and surrendered. But Hamas is for Hamas and for their agenda, and so that's
all the
what
while
we're doing.
using their own people as human shields. There's just about 400 miles of tunnels underneath Gaza, and not one Gaza civilian is allowed in. It's all for Hamas fighters.
Yeah,
so
if they really want to
Hamas
protect their
wants to
civilians.
they want to maximize Palestinian casualties. That is perfect for them, because they get to take a picture, and when there's no real pictures, they make one up and they show it to the world, and the world doesn't even question it. They just go with it. And then maybe
the New York Times
5 days later,
making
they have to retract it, and not, in some far reaches of the internet, but the lies already spread around the world 10 times.
Correct. And the New York Times is spreading, the malnutrition.
Yes, they're absolutely guilty. And the New York Times did not put the retraction in their main publication. They put it in like a PR
tweet,
PR piece,
not even on their main account.
It's pathetic.
Yeah.
I would think it'd be embarrassing as a mainline media outlet I would think that would be really embarrassing to take Hamas propaganda, spread it, and then when you do your retraction, don't even do a full retraction.
I mean, they're losing credibility daily.
Right.
Every minute.
But are they? That's what I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the misinformation really is so disturbing and so upsetting. Justin, I'm so glad you mentioned, innocent lives, because, you focus on the atrocities of October 7th. But how do you, both as filmmakers and as Christians, wrestle with, holding space for those innocent victims? Because I'm sure, fellow Christians must have an opinion about that to you as well, who don't maybe support Israel and the Jewish population as in the same way or in the same light.
Listen, I want the war to end yesterday, because I want to see lives spared. Mm-hmm. But I always have to come back to just answering the question of why. Why are these civilians dying? What's the cause of it? And the answer to that for me is Hamas.
Right. They could end it. They could end it this second.
This second.
Absolutely.
Right. Yep. They can release the hostages, this moment. And they should be, by the way, they should be not starving those hostages. They should be feeding them. Oh my
God.
Absolutely. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And so it's hard, you hold these, moral tensions, you have to deal with that, and I don't want to, just be flippant. But the Bible does say there is a time for war. And I think this war that Israel is fighting is justified. I think what they're doing, they're defending their people against a terrorist organization that has vowed to wipe Israel off the map, and they need to be eliminated. And listen, they're fighting against a terrorist organization that's doing something that no other terrorist organization has ever done, and that's to build an underground fortress under a civilian population.
Yeah,
and leaves its civilians totally exposed. And so,
Israel's fighting for what I feel they're fighting for all of Western civilization. So they're demonized in the world, and yet they're on the front lines of fighting the most radicalized ideologies and people. Right? It's a kind of Al Qaeda, ISIS. It's the same ideologies. There's not much difference.
And I think it's important to say too, we shouldn't be holding Israel to a standard that's different than we would hold the United States to. Did not the United States after 9/11 go after Al Qaeda
for 20 years?
For 20 years, and I think the United States was very justified in doing that. sadly, in the course of that war, there were thousands and thousands of civilians who died. This is the sad reality of the world that we live in. And this is why, we look towards, we have a future hope when there will be one day peace on earth.
Yeah.
And goodwill toward men.
But but on a heart level, I pray for the Palestinians in Gaza on a regular basis, that God would protect innocent civilians, that he would even reveal himself to them. I mean, there's Gazans and Muslims having dreams of Jesus coming to them, and it's like these amazing, miraculous events happening that are changing their life. And I pray for those events for them. I pray for their protection. It's real, and they need our thoughts, and they don't need our thoughts. They need our prayers.
They absolutely
much,
absolutely.
And our advocacy. Yeah.
You mentioned, Israel being demonized. Does it surprise you to the extent? I mean, you've been there so many times. You know what the history is of all this, but this is such a different scope. And I'm just curious, is it more than you thought was possible?
For me, I didn't ever think I would see this happen in my day. I thought this
Not in
was
my lifetime.
some future event where I knew it'd get bad, and I believe it's going to get worse at some point, but I didn't think I would see this. I'm constantly blown away. It absolutely blows my mind, from our universities to our school systems and what people are teaching with this
mainstream media.
Marxist ideology is like an open door to Israel hatred.
The school system is really something else.
It is
school stuff.
And it's coming. Listen, it's coming from the right and the left. I mean, that's it's scary. It's amazing the number of followers that some of these people have on both sides who espouse just a total, anti-Israel or pro-Hamas point of view, and how many people are being influenced by that. So, yeah, I was. We've been watching this. Todd and I have been seeing this kind of move in this direction for several years. But I don't think either one of us could imagine the number of people after October 7th. I mean, literally just, within 24 to 48 hours, who are out on the streets in the thousands, who are celebrating what Hamas had done.
All over the world.
All over the world.
Chanting in Sydney, they're chanting "Gas the Jews" at the Opera House.
Yeah, so we're deeply concerned.
It really blows my mind. It blows my mind. One of our viewers, Maybeth, was asking, do you have any insight as to why so many people around the world have no problem siding with a terrorist agenda?
Because
I think it's because they think Israel is the enemy.
Right.
They think Israel they're the bad guys.
Yeah. If you're taught a Marxist ideology where you have the oppressed and the oppressor, and you have the white is the oppressor, colored people are the oppressed, and then you're told that Jews are white and they're colonialists, imperialist aggressors, then it's like they don't even have to think about whose side they're on, and the whole thing is a false narrative. Jews have been living, they're in the indigenous people. They've been living there for at least 3,500 years, continuously,
by the way. Yeah. Continuously.
And they're the indigenous, but that's the narrative is completely flipped, and people don't know enough history to know any better. So I don't even think they bat an eye. They think, oh, I'm morally obligated to be against Israel.
Yeah.
Wow. I guess I have to ask, what gives you hope?
Well, listen, we're religious, we're spiritual people. We believe in God, And we've seen God's faithfulness to the people of Israel for well over 3,500 years. And he's come through every single time. Every single time the Jewish people, someone's tried to wipe them off the map, God has intervened in some way and enabled the Jewish people to not only survive, but to thrive, to punch way above their grade. I mean, look at, they're only 0.2% of the world population. You would think that they should easily be wiped off the map, but they haven't been. I'd often like to point people to what God promised in Jeremiah chapter 31. I think it's really important for people to hear this. In Jeremiah chapter 31 at verse 35, it reads, "This is what the Lord says. He who appoints the sun to shine by day, who decrees the moon and stars to shine by night, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar, the Lord Almighty is his name. Only if these decrees vanish from my sight, declares the Lord, will Israel ever cease being a nation before me. This is what the Lord says. Only if the heavens above can be measured and the foundations of the earth below be searched out, will I reject all the descendants of Israel because of all they have done, declares the Lord." So look, hear that. I mean, God's saying, listen, as long as the sun and the moon and the stars, they continue to shine, listen, Israel is forever going to be a nation before me. There is nothing you can do.
He's going to glorify himself through Israel.
So
that's what gets hearing that is really something, because to see what is being spewed towards Israel and the Israelis, and knowing that is in there.
Yeah, I think when you're fighting against Israel, and in some ways you're fighting against God himself.
Right. I mean, that's before I let both of you go, I'd love to know, the film is out October 3rd. If viewers watching October 7th bearing witness to the massacre, what do you hope the one thing they remember will be?
Go ahead, Todd.
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I hope they remember what happened and why it happened, and stand up and speak out so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. And we begin the film, that says, may their memory be for a blessing, those who were killed, who perished on 10/7. And so what Todd just said, as far as like this is like the time, to act, to speak up and so forth. I would hope that people would do it for those who perished, do it for those whose lives were ruthlessly and brutally taken for one reason and for one reason only, because they were Jews. Just as those who were murdered during the Holocaust, it's the same reason why 10/7 happened. And, we need to be coming together, those who have the moral clarity to do so, to be speaking up and to be acting on behalf of the nation of Israel.
I try to share the fact that this family risked, because I think, let alone if a mom and dad risked their lives to save my mother, but they didn't just risk their lives. They risked 11 lives to take in 2 strangers. Like that is, I would not be here. And, I wish I accepted it, understood it younger, so I could have been speaking up all along, but I'm doing it now. In the film, towards the end, I'll let people see it for themselves, but where surfing plays a role is so powerful. Todd, with that in the film, I had never heard of anything like it.
That was a refreshing amazing experience at the end of a terrible filming trip. Terrible meaning of what I experienced.
The emotional impact on you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, for me, it was like visiting Yad Vashem or the Holocaust. You get the same feeling when you're on, I got the same feeling when I was on those sites in Israel. So yes, if you get to the, when you get to the end of the film, it's a nice breather.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a nice breather, but it's it's something that helps the Israelis who have lived through this horrific, and they deserve some.
Yeah, there's just for the listener right now.
Yeah,
it's like, what happened at the end of the what is this all about? There's a great organization called
My Wave.
My Wave in English.
Hagal Shali is My Wave.
Yeah,
they're amazing.
And they've been doing programs since very shortly after October 7th with survivors, just to help them to heal through the trauma that they've been through by getting out and surfing, and it's told in the film at the end. It's a beautiful work that they're doing, and so yeah.
Before you just talked, it was a great way to end that experience. I mean, coming home after that, how difficult was it to, and maybe you haven't, sort of, I don't want to say forgotten, because I know you haven't forgotten and you won't forget, but, emotionally that just had to been.
Yeah. Well, I was at the doorstep in Nir Oz, which is one of the kibbutz communities that lost 1/4 of their population was either murdered or kidnapped on October 7th. And I was at the doorstep of the Beavis family. The mom and the boys, Kafir and Ariel. Kafir was 9 months at the time. Ariel was 4. And Shiri, the mom. And I remember seeing footage of them being taken, and it was just...
Me too.
Right. It's seared in my mind, just the terror in her eyes and trying to protect her kids. And I was at that doorstep, at the door where they were taken. And I have redheads, so it was like, it hit home, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very surreal to be standing in these places.
And little did I know, we did not know, Justin and I did not know, nobody knew at the time, that they had already been dead for quite a long time. Right. They were brutally murdered.
Yes, strangled to death. Yep. Yeah.
Like that month.
So,
I mean, I have not been to Israel, like I said, since 2010, but I did go to the Nova exhibit here in New York City when it had traveled here. And that was quite, you don't leave that at the door when you walk out after.
What I've heard.
Yeah, there's a command in the New Testament where the Apostle Paul writes to mourn with those who mourn, right? Mourn with those who mourn. And this film is an opportunity for people to do that, to step into the trauma and the loss and the tragedy that the people of Israel experienced on October 7th and are still experiencing really today. This is a continuing trauma. And to enter into that, to be able to sympathize, empathize. And I believe when you do that, I think it enables you to have the compassion that is often necessary to then reach out to people and to understand where people are at, meet them where they're at. So hopefully our film helps people do that. I mean, I don't want to call it, the film a gift to the Jewish community and to the nation of Israel, but in a sense, that's kind of, we felt as filmmakers like we had a responsibility to steward your story well. And because this is going to live on. There's going to be people 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now who are going to be looking back on this event in Jewish history. And they're going to be looking for resources to better understand what it was like. And so we did it with that kind of that sense of care. And I hope that is conveyed through what people see on the screen.
I know they will. Gentlemen, thank you so much for caring enough to do it and for making this film and all that you do, because I'm going to watch the other films. I want to know more. I've always been interested to learn more. I'll just say this: history was not something I was interested in as a kid, and maybe that is because I am the child of two survivors who didn't talk about it that often. But to not have something happen again, we need to talk about it. We all need to understand it. And you are doing that in spades, and I'm eternally grateful to you two for doing that.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you, Alan.
My pleasure, gentlemen. Be well.
You too. Bless you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. Thank you to Justin Kron and Todd Morehead for spending this time with us and for creating this powerful new documentary, October 7th, bearing witness to the massacre. The film will be released on October 3rd on most streaming platforms, including Prime Video. As I leave you, remember, we all have choices to make in life. Speak up, do the hard thing, and let's all fight hate for good. I truly believe conversations like this can change the world around us. War is certainly not the answer, and hate is not the answer. Feel free to share these episodes with your friends and family. And until the next conversation, please, everybody, stay safe.